Hello and welcome back to Build Propulsion Lab. Where is my Build Propulsion Lab? Here we go. Build Propulsion Lab at DP Summit 2023. Very excited to have two guests with me this time. Sergei Egorov, Eli Aleyner, co-founders of AtomicJar, which they proudly represent with their t-shirts. AtomicJar test containers. We're going to talk about what it is, why it's there. Welcome.
Thanks
How
for
do you like
having
the
us.
event so far?
2 out of 2 so far, like amazing events. Looking forward to next decade of developer productivity summits. I think it will be like one. It is already one of my most favorite conferences, and I'm not saying it because we are currently at DPU Summit, hosted by.
No. That's a completely unbiased opinion, obviously.
Yes, but no, actually, I really enjoyed last year's one, and there's something unique about it. It's just like you're here with other people, like same-minded people, other than Android people. Like I don't understand Android people. They talk about something else, but it's also do something on the back end. Just wow, you can skip all this preamble where I explain why developer productivity, why build matters. None of that. It's just hey, can we talk straight? You can even skip chit-chatting because they're also here to talk about their favorite topic. And you have 500, minus Android developers here, 350 people of same-minded folks who just want to talk about developer productivity. Amazing.
Yeah, so I think it's also the state of our industry that developer productivity is pretty much on everybody's mind, right? We are somewhere when you say developer productivity and everybody go oh yes.
Everyone wants to pay attention to developer productivity. But there's very few places in the world where you can come to and meet all the leaders of all the large organizations that are super excited about this topic. This is a place we're excited to be here. We're excited to be joining you over here and hear so many leaders talk about how passionate they are about this subject.
Yeah, that's definitely a good subject to be passionate about because it's very clear to everybody why it matters, right? I mean, you don't need to take half an hour to explain why developer productivity is important because it's productivity. Obviously, it's important, right? and especially now, those days when the systems become more and more complicated, right? Which slows down innovation. And you're okay, you have your Facebook, your Google, your whatever, and they work years for painting this button in a new color. It's just hard, not because suddenly they aren't as awesome as they used to be 10 years ago. It's just because this software is so complicated that the productivity actually declines.
But you know what? I think you should also, not you, but someone else should have unconference, developer counterproductivity on East Coast, if you understand why. And this is where enterprise developers are I don't want to move fast. I don't want to ship 5 times a day. I want my quarterly releases. I want to do 9 to 5. I don't care if my build takes 5 hours or 10 hours. 10 is better because you can run the build and go watch YouTube.
And the keynotes will be your CISO that will come and say, if you don't do anything, you are secure and safe.
It's secure.
And you're legal. That will be the second keynote.
Right.
And they will come and say, if you don't do anything, you are not in danger of any lawsuits.
If it's not broken, don't touch it. It's secure. No changes means you stay legal, you stay compliant. No, I think there must be a conference.
It's going to be awesome. We should organize it. It's so good.
Yep.
Jokes aside, something that's been on my mind, and I think this is something that it's an interesting concept for a lot of companies in the developer productivity space, not only Gradle, but also AtomicJar and test containers, is what does it mean to make developers work more productive? And I spoke with, when we did the developer productivity, Build Propulsion Lab at UberConf, I spoke with Jane Boyarsky, who you as Java guys know who I'm talking about. She's a legend. She was running a forum that was called Java Ranch before Stack Overflow. So that was the Stack Overflow for Java.
Yes, you're right. And no, you know what else? You should try Jarable. Oh no, this is for old school people. Yes.
Yeah, no, we're old. How to say that we're old without saying that we're old? We are
Yes.
old, right? So, and Jane told me something that kind of stuck with me, and this is how I see a lot of developer productivity definition in those days. You remember all the hype about shift left, how everything is shift left, security shift left, ops, or like whatever. Developer productivity is also a lot about shift left. In the end of the day, we're talking about fostering faster feedback, but also we want as much feedback as possible. In the ideal world, I will take all the quality gates that I have in my CI/CD, all the unit tests, integration tests, performance tests, compliance, security, whatever, put it into my IDE and make it, just mark it red to like sub-second time as it was when I mistyped my my variable. So that would be my vision for what developer productivity might mean in one of the views on that.
We strongly agree, to be honest with you. As we go and talk to lots of organizations, the fast feedback cycle is so critically important for them. Being able to discover issues. The earlier you discover the issue, the faster it is to fix it. The less it costs, and actually the less you take the developer out of their flow state, right? And that's very, very key to developers, right? If you go and talk to them, they're like, oh, like the long feedback cycle, the waiting minutes or often hours for something to fail in CI, that actually brings a lot of frustration to developers. This is not just, you go and talk to business leaders and they're like, oh, return on investment and like business metrics. But fundamentally to engineers, this is not about a metric. This is about a feeling, an internal feeling. Am I productive? Am I making progress? Am I using myself more effectively? And, we talk to a lot of business leaders, and for them, they view software engineering as a factory. It's not a factory. It's something that developers do. It's something that developers are able to produce when they're in a particular flow, when they have they're not overloaded with things, that they're not, and the longer you take to give them feedback, the more they forget about what they used to do, and the harder it is to get back into the state. So we strongly agree the faster the feedback, the better, and the more realistic the feedback, and the more the feedback is, consistent, and the less flaky it is, the more that's critically important.
And that kind of brings me to the topic of test containers, because this is another tool that really revolutionized how we get this feedback, right? Because we used to think about we can do some things really fast and we will do them the part of the build, that will be your unit tests. But there are some things that just impossible to get in my developer environment. Integration tests. If I need to test something against my database, well, I'm out of luck. It will happen maybe during my CI/CD or maybe not, but it's definitely never was something that I consider being in my IDE or in my local build.
I would say it used to be impossible.
Exactly.
Fair. But also, I think one of the issues with integration testing in general was that it wasn't owned by developers. It was someone else, like ops team or QA team or someone else. Like it was never given to developers. So developers weren't in control of that. And in fact, that's how test containers got created. Just like Richard Norris, the original creator of test containers, just like, no, I want to own this experience. Like I want to be like the decision maker on how we do integration testing. And he had this like famous story of like running across the office in Japan, actually, because he was in Japan back then and below Japan, with a CD of Oracle database, like literal CD of Oracle database, and just like asking everyone to install it to have a consistent developer environment for everyone because it was needed. And then just like, can we do better? Like, is there anything that can enable us to do better? And like Docker was the answer.
I would say it wasn't really like impossible, but if we did that, it wasn't realistic. That's the other trade-off. I mean, we could always run MySQL embedded, not MySQL, what's it called, like the H2 or Derby, inside my build, right? Inside my test, I can start it up in the beginning of the test, tear it down in the end of the test, and it will work, and I control it. But the problem is that then in production, we actually are like we run DB2 or Oracle, and it's nothing like it. So there was a trade-off of pick one. Either you control it, but it's not realistic, or it's realistic, but you are in the mercy of your IT department provisioned environments. That maybe will happen, probably not.
In fact, I think the biggest gains in developer productivity and just in general is removing human-to-human interactions. Because it used to be human-to-human. Like you as a human, be a Jira ticket asking another human to install something on your Jenkins node just so we can test it. It's just like, and by the time they do that, like in 2 weeks, you already upgraded your version of Postgres in production. So you close the ticket, you submit a new ticket. Can you now install Postgres 9.5 because 9.4 is no longer relevant? In 2 weeks, of course you upgraded again or something happens. And it wasn't efficient because like there are no slower interactions than human to human.
Especially technical systems. But maybe I'll build a little bit on what both of you have said. Right, this idea of control. This idea of control is so paramount for developers. They like the removal of control and having somebody else do something for them is so foreign, especially waiting for something else to happen. What we're observing is actually interesting. This idea, we believe that test containers brings control back to the developers. And what we're seeing is developers adopt it in organizations across the world. And what we believe is driving this is this idea of control. I do not want to be dependent on the central team that is doing X, Y, and Z. I'm going to take things into my own hands. I'm gonna bring the experience to my local machine. I want to be able to get feedback as quickly as possible. And sometimes we joke internally that test containers is how oftentimes developers cheat on their platform teams. Because in a lot of ways, they bring it, and because they want the control, and some extremely smart platform teams, some of them are over here, embrace it and want to bring test containers to the rest of the organization, and we work with them side by side. Others are still a little bit further behind, and we are looking forward to working with them.
Yeah, that's, that's like developer relations right there, right? I mean, developers like the product, they start using it. In the end of the day, it's so popular and so critical for the developers that there is no going back. Yep, for sure.
And I think Eli made a good point that it's not really about, yes, in some sense it's cheating on platform team at the early adoption of the technology. So like platform team wouldn't even know that something is happening, but there is also a lot of value in developers being able to do things without platform team being involved. That's actually quite literally, I think, should be like the biggest KPI for the platform team. The amount of involvement of the platform team into day-to-day developer life. Like if you have to be day-to-day with them, you're doing something wrong. If you build a platform that just scales with the developers, I think that's the definition of success, right?
It's almost like those, you remember the old-fashioned ops people that was measured by, I'm not doing anything, it means that everything is good, right?
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Now this is right, you know what, this is a very good metric for a platform team. If everything, well, it's one of them. The second is like, people are happy with the platform. Because they might not do anything, but
I think this is key. People being happy with the platform. People like, and who are those people? Those are the developers.
Developers, for sure.
And when you start looking at the developer lifecycle, right? A lot of platform teams are very focused on deployments and how you get stuff to production, and that's critically important. But when you think about where do developers spend most of their day, well, some of them spend waiting for CI, but hopefully we will solve that, right? You and us can help them. But fundamentally, developers spend a lot of their time in the inner loop. And the more you can help them in the inner loop, the faster you can make their cycles, the more that produces a ton of value. And also happiness.
Absolutely. And when you mentioned that the platform is mostly perceived as an ops platform, This
Yes.
is the reality today, right? So
Yes.
in the end of the day, we just renamed the SRE and DevOps engineers into platform engineers, which is great because DevOps engineers are not a thing. Yes.
True that.
Yeah. So platform engineers are awesome. In the end of the day, what do? They write YAML files for Kubernetes. Critical, important, great for them. We applaud those heroes, but
From Norwegian.
yes,
Yeah.
but it's not only that. In the end of the day, developer productivity engineering requires a platform for the inner loop, for the faster feedback. So we need to shift platform engineering left as well. Jeez, this is so good.
Love it. And no, I think that's a very strong point. Similar to DevOps, where like, hey, we all adopt DevOps practices, but then like there was a lot of focus on ops and like on production systems, and it's just like, hey, this is not exactly what DevOps is. It's about collaboration. It's about people working together. It's about removing the boundaries. And the same should happen. And I'm getting this very annoying Twitter ad. Like DevOps is dead, platform engineering is a new thing. And there is a guy standing like this by the tombstone. Like I'm sure all of us got this ad on Twitter. Someone was promoting it really, really hard because someone wrote a book. And here I am promoting it. God damn it. But the key here is we should not forget about like the role of developers in all this like platform engineering story. And at the end of the day, like it's getting more and more about the developers actually. And it's also just like, if you shift more to the left, then you realize that not much is left on the right side other than production. So yeah, I'm really excited to see more focus on developers. And as a CEO of the company, I got to talk about like how budgets are distributed right now. And I'm excited to see more and more like CISO and kind of CIO attention to developers, like the developer stream of budget spend. Not just, okay, like how can we spend it on the platform, on production, on security, but actually, hey, what's about developers? Because they hit the limit of kind of what they can do in other areas, and they still need to spend budget. So I'm excited to see more budget going into developers stream of work.
I don't think it's just because they have too much money on their hand that they need to spend. I think in the end of the day, the message of productivity is kind of a penetrating in the industry, and it comes from the top. And when you talk to the leadership and we talk to the leadership, it's pretty obvious that in order to maintain the pace of innovation that today's industry requires, that the customers and the users want, there is no way around it. We have to increase developer productivity, and if it requires the budget to be spent on that from security perspective, from governance perspective, from any perspective, this is the next step. This is what has to be done. It cannot be all spent into the production platform just because you can only run in production what was created by the developers.
And if software is eating the world, developers are the chefs.
Exactly. Or as we heard this morning in the keynote, at least they are the knife factory that slices and dices the code.
I hope it won't turn into an awkward reference, given that we're in San Francisco. It's famous for having knife parties in the streets.
Oh, that was dark. What we refer about is a very good point that Hans Dr. Gradle CEO made of how can we learn from other industries, and the example was a meat processing factory and their relationship with knives. Mm-hmm. That was very interesting, and I think there are two important points that at least I took from there. The first is no one knew or no one bothered to create tools to measure the sharpness of a knife until 2014. I mean, there is an entire industry that flew blind for at least decades, if we not count centuries, and this is pretty impressive. The second is how the sharpness measure. When Hans asked everybody, hey, how do you think knives are measured? I would expect like, okay, microns, and maybe like how sharp, how wide the blade is. It's measured in microns. But no, actually it measured on the only thing that matters, how good it cuts. Right? So there is this device that you actually kind of cut it and it measures how well the cut actually went. This is like about, and there is a lesson for all of us to make sure that we actually measure what matters and not just some number that is related, but not necessarily provides the right feedback.
I think that this idea that it's hard to measure has actually made it difficult for organizations to invest. If you think about a P&L of a typical organization, where do they spend most of their money? Most of their money actually walks in and walks out of the building every single day, right? The people that they have is one of their biggest assets. And there's a lot of talk in the industry of how do you measure developer productivity. I sometimes I question why, because what are we going to do with that number? But that's beside the point, right? It's also, there's lots of like DORA metrics, this metric, the other metric. A lot of time, and this morning actually, the Ali Riza from Uber talked a lot about like, hey, all of those metrics are cute, but in a lot of ways, NPS and how the developers perceive their effectiveness is super key. And actually, I just walked out of a talk about, hey, look, you can do all of those objective metrics, which are, speed to mean time to recovery and all, and they're good, but they're not particularly predictive of outcomes. And one of the main things that actually does predict outcomes, and actually is so key, is how developers feel how productive they are, and how do they think about productivity, and how do they feel about, because at the end of the day, this is not a factory developers are in. This is not, hey, I'm going to give them an hour and they're going to do another check-in. It's a creative process that they're in. And a lot of the thinking, doesn't happen 9 to 5. A lot of the thinking, it's about reducing cognitive load and what they are able to do and making it simpler for them to achieve what they're trying to do.
This is so on point. And in one of the previous interviews today, I spoke with Max, who runs developer productivity engineering in LinkedIn, and he made the same point. I mean, regardless of what this metric or another metric or this number or another metric shows, even if you believe that that's a good metric and you improved it and it can be improved and you put some effort, even the end of the day, your developer is upset about something else, even if you truly believe that you fixed the biggest problem, you didn't achieve anything, because at the end of the day, your developer is still not productive by what they perceive to be productive. And that's exactly the difference between measuring the width of the blade and actually trying to cut something with it and see if it works. That's exactly that. And the last point that I kind of also was very profound for me from today's keynote is how they used this metric of knife sharpness as a perfect proxy to understand how professional the people are and where do they need to invest in training. And this is also something that is very, very profound and can be taken perfectly to our industry. When you see how people use the productivity tools, you can see who needs help in order to bring them to the next level.
And there was a very nice reference to developers, like the process of development being less mechanical. Actually, it's more of an art. Like developers are artists. Like some are successful, some are not. Like we can argue about that. Some artists also are kind of copying stuff, like just like doing like 10 art pieces a day just because like that's their job. But that's not the point. The point here is also, I think, like how do you measure artist productivity? Like like if someone paints paints art, like how do you measure it? It's
lines of code, number of paintings in a day.
Yep. But
exactly.
I think there is one clear measurement we can make, like whether they like their tooling or not, like whether they like their brushes or not, whether they find their like it's like good enough or not, and their oil good enough or not. And I think there's a strong point about NPS score and kind of like on the negative side of things. Like developers and like people in general, they won't tell you that like things are great, but they will definitely tell you something is really bad. So maybe that's where we should focus. Just like,
And that's
are we
exactly that,
satisfying?
right? That's exactly the right measurement. Did we fix the problem the developer hated, right? So that's particular thing the developer hated. If this problem is solved, we're doing our work as it should be done.
And developers hated testing, and I hope with the work on test continuous, we made some developers happier just because we fixed the testing for them.
Boom!
If I may.
Right there. Perfect. Okay, folks, thank you very much. It was a pleasure as usual. I hope our I hope our audience had as much fun as I did during this interview. And we'll see you in next episodes of Build Propulsion Lab. Thank you very much. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Bye.